Our issue segment tonight, President Trump is expected to sign a new executive order on immigration tomorrow. The president's initial order temporarily halting all entries into the United States from 7 Muslim-majority countries was blocked by a federal judge. The new executive order reportedly aims to clear up that confusion by exempting green card holders. With me now to break it down, constitutional attorney Chris Gober. Chris, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Chris, President Trump has postponed the release of his new executive order. We expected it the beginning of last week. Now it's reportedly going to be the end of this week. What exactly needs to be different about this order compared to the last one so that it doesn't get caught up in the courts like the first one?
It needs to be changed in 2 key respects. And first and foremost, it needs to make clear that it only applies to people who have never stepped foot on the U.S. soil, and that it does not apply either to green card holders or even to illegal immigrants who are here on U.S. soil illegally. And that may not make a lot of sense to anybody, but it comes down to due process rights, and effectively who has due process under our Constitution, which means who has the right to challenge either their denial of entry in court versus those people who do not. And that's where the travel ban, one place where it really got hung up in the Ninth Circuit.
Right, so let me clarify this, just make sure that I understand this and that my viewers understand this. There's a difference, you're saying, between, and we're just talking about illegal immigrants for a moment. There's a difference between illegal immigrants who are already here in the United States, they're already on U.S. soil, and those who have never set foot. The due process rights as applied by our courts are different for those two groups?
Yeah, and that's surprising to a lot of people. But once you are here on U.S. soil, the courts have held that people here, even if you're here illegally, that you have due process rights, and that your removal and that process, you're subject to notice and a proceeding before a court before you can be removed from the United States.
Right, so that's what needs to change then in the second one to make that crystal clear so that there aren't those legal hang-ups with illegal immigrants who have already set foot. That's very interesting. That's not a point, actually, that's not a point that I've heard before as one of the changes that needs to be made. That's the first one. What's the second point? What's the second thing that needs to be changed?
So they need to remove any language that applies to religion. If you might recall, one part of the travel ban was it's a suspended U.S. refugee admissions program for 120 days. And after that 120 days expired, the president directed the Secretary of State to begin admitting refugees based off whether their religion was a minority religion in their country of origin. The concern and problem with that is there are other ways to obtain refugee status, for example, political affiliation. So if that executive order starts giving preference based off of religion alone, it could be subject to challenge, and certainly people are going to challenge that as a violation of our religious establishment clause in the Constitution.
Right, no doubt it'll be challenged, but let me push back on this one just a little bit because this is actually not something that's new. This is not something that President Trump is doing for the first time. We've had immigration policy that has prioritized religious minorities. This isn't saying the actual name of the religion. This is not saying Christian or Muslim or Jewish or what have you. This is saying if you're a minority religion in that country, so in Muslim majority countries that might be Christian, in Christian majority countries that might be Muslim, I guess I don't understand why that's a problem, since it's the fact that they're a minority, not the fact that not the tenets of their religion.
Well, keep in mind, it's not necessarily of what is absolutely constitutional here in the history. I think the reality is one thing we've learned is it only takes one federal judge in the entire country to disagree. And part of the travel ban in this new executive order, what they should be working on is not just what's constitutional, but frankly taking it a step further of what has the best chance of surviving judicial review across the country. And even then, we, based off of, as controversial as this is, we very well may see another judge somewhere in the United States strike down that travel ban. But if it's drafted correctly, or, with a lot of these factors in mind, when it gets appealed to the circuit courts, it's a lot more likely to survive muster at that point and to be upheld.
Right, and I mean, you're an attorney, the President of the United States has the executive authority to be able to write, to create, to dictate immigration policy in this way. That is something that he is endowed with as the chief executive. But I guess even with these changes made then, even if these two things, that you mentioned, making sure there's a differentiation between illegals who've set foot in our nation before or who haven't, and making sure there's no religion included in the order at all, how is this going to make a difference in the court if the reason that the first order was overturned was because, in the judge's words, things that Donald Trump said on the campaign trail versus what was actually included in the letter of the text?
Yeah, so the biggest issue really before the Ninth Circuit, and if you go back to the Friday that the executive order was released, there was this big question of whether it applied to green card holders and lawful permanent residents. And you had DHS originally come out and say it doesn't apply to them. And then reportedly the White House overruled them, said no, it does apply to them. And there was confusion kind of back and forth. And in the meantime, you had these people that was detained. That was the primary reason that the Ninth Circuit had a problem with the travel ban. And so if you come out with a new executive order, make clear from the get-go that it does not apply to lawfully permanent residents or green card holders, then you will remove one of the biggest issues the Ninth Circuit has. I think that once you take some of those corrective actions and the government can provide some evidence for why they're focusing on these particular countries, I think that Ninth Circuit or any other court is going to have a hard time now kind of using Donald Trump's statements on the campaign trail to overrule his broad authority as president of the United States.
Right. And I mean, maybe you have a little more confidence in the Ninth Circuit than I do, but I guess we're going to see within the matter of days now. President Trump's expected to release this order, or perhaps even a series of separate orders that deal with each individual component before too long. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was great to talk to you.